All right, get ready for this one. This Vikings-Rams game Thursday night, Week 8, it was a lot closer than anybody thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I was surprised. I mean, the Vikings were coming off their first loss.
Right, trying to bounce back.
Yeah, and the Rams, they were struggling at 2-4,
Ah.
but they had Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua back, so there was a lot of anticipation to see how they would perform.
And they definitely changed the dynamic of that Rams offense. It's a totally different team when those guys are healthy.
Absolutely. Stafford having his two most reliable targets back, it just opens up the field for everybody.
Right, it's like defenses can't just key in on one or two guys anymore. They got to account for Kupp, they got to account for Nako.
Exactly. It creates so many more challenges.
And early on, it looked like the Vikings might not have adjusted to those changes just yet. Sam Darnold came out on fire. I mean, he completed what, like 8 straight passes for 97 yards and 2 touchdowns?
Yeah, it was an incredible start for him. Just shows you how comfortable he's getting in that Vikings system.
Yeah.
Making good decisions, throwing with accuracy, even against a tough Rams defense.
Yeah, it was impressive. But then, of course, you got Justin Jefferson on the other side.
Oh, I can't forget about him.
He's always a threat. He had, 68 yards on just 5 catches?
Yeah, the Rams secondary, they just couldn't contain him.
He's so good at getting open.
He is arguably the best receiver in the league right now.
I mean, it's hard to argue with that.
His speed, his route running, his hands, he's just a complete package.
And then, even with the Vikings doing so well early on, Kyren Williams, the Rams running back, kept his scoring streak alive.
Yeah, 10 touchdowns this season. And he scored in 10 straight games.
Talk about consistency.
He's been a real bright spot for them.
Absolutely. And, even though they were trailing, I felt like the Rams had this different energy when Kupp and Nacua came back.
Right. It's like Stafford just seemed more confident having them out there.
Yeah, like there was this sense of hope.
Like they could still compete.
Even though they were down.
Even against a tough team like the Vikings.
So you have these two really interesting narratives developing. You got the Vikings trying to bounce back after that loss. And then you got the Rams trying to claw their way back into the game.
Yeah.
Trying to prove that they're still a threat.
Yeah, it makes for a really compelling matchup.
Absolutely.
And to really understand how this game played out, we got to look at the key matchups.
Yeah, like where were the real battles within the game?
Exactly. For example, can the Rams' offensive line, which has been a bit of a weakness for them this season, can they hold up against the Vikings' defense?
Especially with Brian Flores calling the plays.
Right. He's known for being very aggressive.
And if Stafford doesn't have time to throw, it doesn't matter how good Kupp and Nacua are.
Exactly. That's going to be a huge factor in this game.
So that's one key matchup to watch.
Yeah.
What else should we be paying attention to?
Well, another big one is going to be the battle between the Rams receivers and the Vikings secondary.
Yeah. Can Kupp and Nacua get open against that Vikings defense?
That's the question.
And can Stafford make those throws under pressure?
Yeah, because we know the Vikings are going to bring the heat.
Right. They're going to try to disrupt that Rams offense.
And the Rams. They're going to have to find ways to counter that.
All right, so we got these key matchups to watch. We got the Vikings trying to bounce back. We got the Rams trying to make a statement. What else happened in this game?
Well, let's talk about some of the hidden battles, some of the details that might have swung the momentum.
Yeah, I love getting into those little things, the things that casual fans might miss.
Right. And in this game, you have to start with the Vikings defense.
And Brian Flores.
Brian Flores. He was the mastermind behind this defensive performance.
He's known for those aggressive schemes.
Yeah. And he didn't disappoint in this one.
So even with Kupp and Nacua back, the Rams' offensive line was still struggling.
Yeah, they showed some improvement, but it was still their weak point.
Uh-huh.
And Flores, he recognized that.
And he exploited it.
Oh, he exploited it big time.
How so?
Well, he was dialing up blitz after blitz, forcing Stafford into hurried throws, just disrupting their rhythm.
And Stafford was sacked a few times too, right?
Yeah, multiple times.
So even with those star receivers, if you don't have time to throw,
it doesn't matter who you have out there.
Right. The offense is going to struggle.
Yeah.
So what kind of blitzes was Flores using?
Well, one thing that stood out to me was his use of delayed blitzes.
Delayed blitzes?
Yeah. So he would initially show pressure with his linebackers, but then he would drop them back into coverage and send defensive backs or even safeties on the blitz.
Wow.
So it created all this confusion for Stafford and the Rams' offensive line.
He could adjust in time.
They just couldn't adjust.
Yeah.
And that led to a lot of pressure.
So it wasn't just brute force. It was that element of surprise.
Exactly. It was the deception.
That really messed with the Rams.
Yeah. Flores was mixing up his looks,
keeping them guessing,
keeping Stafford guessing.
never letting him get comfortable.
It was a masterclass in defensive scheming.
Okay, so the Vikings defense was putting on a clinic. What about their offense, though? Did they keep up that same intensity all game long?
Well, it's interesting. After that initial explosion in the first half.
Right, where they scored all those points?
They seemed to shift gears a little bit.
How so?
They went away from those big explosive plays, and they kind of settled into a more controlled, methodical approach.
So they were playing it safe?
Maybe. It seemed like they recognized the Rams' offensive potential.
Okay.
And they decided to focus on controlling the clock, keeping Stafford and that Rams offense off the field.
So classic run the ball, control the clock strategy.
Exactly.
Especially when you have a lead.
Yeah. You want to milk that clock as much as possible.
And the Vikings running game. With Dalvin Cook.
He's a workhorse.
He can definitely wear down a defense.
Absolutely.
So they had the defense playing well. They had the running game going. Were they able to hold off the Rams?
Well, you got to remember, the Rams have a lot of offensive firepower.
Right, even when they're down.
They're not going to just give up.
It sounds like this one went down to the wire.
It did. It did.
All right, so tell me, what happened next?
Well, we talked about the offense. We talked about the defense.
But
there's another element that often gets overlooked.
Special teams.
Special teams.
The unsung heroes of football.
Exactly. And in this game, the Vikings special teams unit, they made some key plays.
Like what?
Well, their punting was excellent.
Okay.
They were consistently pinning the Rams deep in their own territory.
Making it harder to mount a comeback?
Right. And their coverage on kickoffs, it was exceptional.
So the Rams couldn't get any momentum in the return game?
Nope.
So the Vikings had all three phases of the game working in their favor?
Offense, defense, special teams.
That's how you win consistently in the NFL.
Especially against a talented team like the Rams.
Right. After all that back and forth, all those key moments, all those strategic decisions, what was the final score?
Well, for that, you'll have to wait until part 3. You'll have to wait to find out the final score, but it was a close one.
Oh, man, you're killing me. Okay, well, before you reveal all, can we talk about the matchup between the Rams receivers and the Viking secondary?
Oh, yeah, that was a fun one to watch.
Because that was key, right?
Absolutely. You got Kupp and Nakua, two of the best route runners in the league, going up against a very solid Viking secondary.
Right.
And then you factor in that chemistry they have with Stafford.
Yeah, it's like they just know where each other are going to be.
It's almost like they can read each other's minds out there.
So how did that matchup play out?
Well, it was a back-and-forth battle.
Okay.
Both sides had their moments, but ultimately, I think the Viking secondary did a good job of limiting Kupp and Nakua's impact.
So they didn't have those huge game-breaking plays?
No, not really. They made some catches, they moved the chains, but they weren't able to completely take over the game.
Like they've done in the past.
Right.
And I think that's a testament to the Vikings coaching staff.
Absolutely. They came up with a good game plan, and the players executed it well.
So the Vikings defense.
They deserve a lot of credit.
All right, so we talked about the key matchups. We talked about the Vikings defense stepping up. Anything else that stood out to you in this game?
Well, I think it's worth mentioning the Vikings' offensive strategy in the second half.
Oh, yeah. They seemed to change things up a bit.
They did. After that explosive first half.
Right, where Darnold was throwing touchdowns left and right.
They went to a more conservative approach.
Run the ball, control the clock.
Exactly.
Especially when you have a lead.
You want to protect that lead and keep the other team's offense off the field.
And Dalvin Cook.
Yeah.
He's the perfect back for that kind of game plan.
Oh, absolutely. He's a tough runner.
He can grind out those yards.
And wear down a defense.
And he can catch the ball out of the backfield, too.
Right. He's a complete back.
So the Vikings, they had the defense playing well. They had the running game going. But the Rams, they weren't going to go down without a fight.
No, they weren't. They kept battling. They kept trying to make plays.
And I think that says a lot about their character.
It does. Even when they're down, they don't give up.
They keep fighting.
They keep competing.
So we're heading to the final minutes of this game. The Vikings have a lead, but the Rams are still hanging around.
Yeah, it's going to be a close finish.
What happened next?
Well, this is where things got really interesting. All right, are you ready for the final score?
Yeah, hit me with it. Did the Rams pull off the upset?
They didn't. The Vikings won. 24-17.
So a close one, like you said?
Oh, yeah. It was a nail-biter.
But the Vikings got the win. They're back on track.
They are. And, it was really a tale of two halves.
Right. Vikings dominated early.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then the Rams, they battled back.
Uh-huh. They made it a game.
They did.
But in the end, the Vikings defense was just too much.
Yeah. Brian Flores, he really outcoached Sean McVay in this one.
Wow.
He had the perfect game plan.
And the players executed it.
To perfection.
So, what are the big takeaways from this game?
Well, I think the biggest one is that the Vikings, they're still a contender.
Despite that loss to the 49ers.
Right. They bounced back.
And they showed they can win a tough game.
On the road.
Against a good team.
Exactly.
And what about the Rams?
Well, for them, it's back to the drawing board. The return of Caponacco, that's a positive.
Absolutely.
They still have some issues to work out.
Like the offensive line.
The offensive line.
And their defense.
Yeah. They need to find a way to get more consistent pressure on the quarterback.
All right, so Vikings looking strong. Rams still have some work to do.
That's a good summary.
This was a fun one to break down.
It was. It was a really exciting game.
And it had a little bit of everything.
Offense, defense, special teams.
Drama, suspense.
It was a great game.
And it makes you wonder, what's going to happen next? What are we going to see in Week 9?
I can't wait to find out.
Well, that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
And be sure to check out all the other great content we have on our website.
Yeah, we've got tons of stuff.
Analysis, predictions, fantasy football advice.
You name it.
So until next time, keep diving deep.